Chapter 3643, Chapter 717, Taboo Dungeons First Clear. Chapter 3643, Chapter 717, Taboo Dungeons First Clear. Chapter 717, Taboo Dungeons First Clear. We won? We won. When Phoenix Rain and the other survivors heard the system notification, they couldn't help but feel like they were dreaming. Although Eucharius had less than 2% of his HP left just now, that still translated to more than 16 trillion HP. With a Tier 6 defensive spell protecting Eucharius, even Los Merin would need some time to do that much damage to the first-generation saint. Outside of Los Merin, Eucharius was more than capable of killing everyone else in that period. However, nobody had expected Shifeng to be able to plunder 16 trillion HP from Eucharius simply by raising his sword. While everyone was in a daze, Shifeng reappeared from the void and quickly collected the sacred phantom ring from the ground. Thank goodness I had the sacred phantom ring to substitute my death. Otherwise, we really would have lost this time. Shifeng breathed a deep sigh of relief as he looked at Eucharius's charred corpse on the ground. The ruined library's difficulty had far exceeded his expectations. Originally, he thought it would have been a battle without any surprises. He never thought he would have to exhaust his trump cards to clear the taboo dungeon. Even then, he had barely succeeded. The last moment where Eucharius went berserk was especially anxiety-inducing. Even though the first-generation saint was clearly in a heavily injured state, he still managed to cast 15 Tier 6 spells simultaneously. His capabilities were simply heaven-defying. Meanwhile, following Eucharius's death, golden glows began enveloping Shifeng one after another as his level skyrocketed. Level 185. Level 187. Level 189. Ultimately, Shifeng's level settled at 191. Aside from Shifeng, some of the lower-level members who survived the battle also leveled up. For example, Crimson Mist had leveled up from level 202 to level 205. Compared to the average boss monster, the EXP Eucharius awarded on death was in a completely different dimension. However, nobody paid much attention to the EXP they gained from Eucharius. Instead, they curiously looked at the sealed golden door after snapping out of their daze. Eucharius was the final boss of their God's Domain's first taboo mode dungeon. He was also the strongest boss monster, bar none they had ever encountered. He was so powerful that, despite being heavily injured, he managed to overwhelm Los Merin, who was a legendary personal guard and a level 212, Tier 6 Dragon Knight. With such a powerful existence serving as the gatekeeper of the ruined library's treasury, the items contained in the treasury should logically be amazing beyond their imaginations. Healers, resurrect the dead. Everyone else, rest for now. We will explore the treasury together later, Shifeng instructed when he saw everyone's passionate gazes. Every treasury in God's domain would contain a mountain of treasures. At the very least, there should be enough items to fully stuff the bags of several dozen players. With time being limited, they naturally had to prioritize resurrecting the dead so that they could have more members help loot the treasury. Upon hearing Shifeng's command, the healers promptly started resurrecting the dead. Around 10 minutes later, the 40 players who had died were resurrected. Let's go in, then. Seeing that everyone had fully recovered, Shifeng made his way toward the treasury's golden door. However, as everyone got closer to the 30-meter door, they were suddenly subjected to a continuous barrage of mental attacks, and over half the team fell to their knees on the spot, unable to move forward any further. What powerful mental attacks! With such an obstacle in place, those without Tier 6 basic concentration won't even be able to enter the treasury, Phoenix Rain, who had arrived before the golden door, said with a somewhat pale complexion. The law chains sealing the golden door had disappeared following Eucharius's death. As a result, those who tried to approach the golden door would now be subjected to powerful mental attacks. These mental attacks were so powerful that they disqualified over half of the team's Tier 5 members as soon as they moved within 100 yards of the door. By the time they were close enough to touch the door, only 15 players remained standing. Aside from the team's Tier 6 members, the rest were all Tier 5 players who had already developed their concentration to the Tier 6 standard. Subsequently, when Shifeng pushed apart the golden door, a stream of even stronger mental attacks assaulted everyone's minds. Everyone felt as if someone had just slammed a hammer into their brain, and even the Tier 6 members of the team had nearly collapsed to their knees from the pain. Those without Tier 6 intermediate concentration should avoid entering. After taking a moment to feel the mental attack's intensity, Shifeng looked at Blue Phoenix and the other Tier 5 experts, who were still struggling to stay standing, and said, "Find a suitable location to train your concentration while you wait for us to collect the treasures." There were both advantages and disadvantages to mental attacks. On the one hand, they could wear out a player's concentration. On the other hand, they could temper a player's mind, providing significant assistance to players in developing their concentration. Of course, such tempering had to be done in moderation. If players tried to tackle mental attacks that were far beyond their tolerance, they could very well suffer soul annihilation. Based on his analysis, the mental attacks inside the treasury would induce significant pain even to players with Tier 6 intermediate concentration. If players tried to enter the treasury with their concentration below the Tier 6 intermediate standard, they would quickly lose consciousness. Phoenix Rain agreed with Shifeng's analysis. So, when she saw the reluctant looks on Blue Phoenix and the others, she said, "Stay here, Blue. It is unfortunate, but you shouldn't throw your life away just for some treasures." Understood. After taking one last look at the corridor beyond the golden door, Blue Phoenix and the other Tier 5 members helplessly backed away and quietly watched as Shifeng and the other 5 Tier 6 members of the team entered the treasury. After Shifeng's group walked down the treasury's entrance corridor for about 10 minutes, they arrived at a palace lined with stone statues. Upon stepping inside the palace, the group was greeted by the sight of mountains of treasures that radiated incredibly dense eternal energy. "Is this the first clear reward?" Ji Luorong couldn't help but gape in shock as she looked at the mountains of treasures before her. It should be known that the God Chaser set had a rather low drop rate throughout the Taboo dungeon. Yet, several of the mountains in this treasury were made up of God Chaser sets entirely. Moreover, all of these God Chaser sets came in complete sets. Aside from the God Chaser sets, the treasury also housed many divine Titan sources, an inferior divine material that all powers dreamed of obtaining to use as a power source. Many items, such as combat puppets, flying ships, and the core magic arrays of guild towns and cities, required a power source. Meanwhile, divine Titan sources were akin to gods among power sources. This was because divine Titan sources generated eternal energy when in use, and should mana-powered items be operated using eternal energy, their capabilities would improve substantially. While Ji Luorong and the others were stunned by how many divine Titan sources were in the treasury, Shifeng had his eyes glued to an old painting hanging on a wall. A divine artifact. Follow current novels on tarpnovelful.com if you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc. Please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3644, Chapter 718, Origin Myth. Chapter 3644, Chapter 718, Origin Myth. Chapter 718, Origin Myth. What did you say, guild leader? A divine artifact. That painting is a divine artifact. When Phoenix Rain and the others heard Shifeng's exclamation, they couldn't help but follow his gaze and look at the unassuming painting on the wall. However, they failed to sense even a strand of mana from the painting, let alone eternal energy. It was no different than the ordinary paintings used as decoration. But Shifeng was far more knowledgeable about God's domain than them, so they couldn't completely discount his words. For those living in their God's domain, divine artifacts were very foreign objects. But at the same time, these were also items they yearned to obtain. Although they didn't have much knowledge regarding the world outside their God's domain, they knew that divine artifacts remained extraordinary items there, and every divine artifact could potentially lead to the birth or death of a titanic existence in the outside world. Now that a divine artifact could potentially be hanging right before their eyes, how could they not be surprised and excited? "I can't say for sure," Shifeng said before hurriedly approaching the painting to appraise it. In reality, Shifeng wasn't particularly familiar with divine artifacts, either. Although he had collected a lot of information on divine artifacts, he never managed to own one himself. Meanwhile, according to his knowledge, divine artifacts normally radiated incredibly dense eternal energy, even when not equipped by a player. Some divine artifacts would even radiate divine might so powerful that they could prevent ordinary Tier 6 experts from approaching it. Moreover, as far as he knew, players couldn't obtain complete divine artifacts outside of trading with or stealing from other players. Instead, players could only acquire complete divine artifacts by repairing fragmented divine artifacts. This was also one of the reasons that made divine artifacts difficult to obtain. Honestly, Shifeng had not noticed anything special about the painting on the wall when he first laid eyes on it. He only suspected it to be a divine artifact rather than a fragmented divine artifact because of the sunlight blade in his bag. Ever since Shifeng obtained the sunlight blade from Chalk Splendor, the weapon had been slumbering in his bag and never made any movements. As he was a human player and could not use the sunlight blade, he could only leave it in his bag and wait for an opportunity to sell it back to the holy race for a good price. However, as soon as he stepped inside the palace just now, the sunlight blade suddenly moved. Or, more specifically, it became incredibly agitated, as if it had encountered something scary. It even tried to escape from his spatial bag. Fortunately, he had kept the sunlight blade in his inferior legendary spatial bag. The interior of an inferior legendary spatial bag was akin to a miniature world, and it came with a world barrier that an ownerless divine artifact couldn't break. Meanwhile, what frightened the sunlight blade to such an extent was none other than the painting on the wall. So long as he looked in the painting's direction, the sunlight blade would immediately become agitated, and it would only settle down once he looked away from it. For the sunlight blade to fear an object so greatly, the object in question would have to be a divine artifact or an item that transcended divine artifacts. However, Shifeng was well aware that godly relics that were stronger than divine artifacts could not be as unassuming as the old painting. Take the shadow incinerator, for example. Even when it was completely sealed, he already had great difficulty getting close to it. Had he encountered the shadow incinerator in its unsealed state, he could have never gotten anywhere near it, let alone obtain it. Hence, Shifeng concluded that the painting was a divine artifact. Divine artifacts in God's domain came in various forms, so it wasn't impossible for a divine artifact to be inconspicuous. A good example would be the Seven Luminaries Alliance's Golden Kingdom. The Golden Kingdom came in the form of a tattered flag, and if a person were to encounter it without knowing what it was, they would never think it was a divine artifact. After arriving before the painting, Shifeng immediately took it down from the wall and started appraising it. It really is one. Shifeng grew ecstatic when he saw the loading bar that appeared after he activated his identification skill. Normally, even when he appraised an inferior legendary material, the process would only need 1 minute. Yet, the appraisal of the painting needed 5 minutes. Apart from divine artifacts, he could think of no other item that required such a long appraisal process. 1 minute. 3 minutes. 5 minutes. The instant the loading bar finished, Shifeng felt his mind spinning, and he very nearly dropped the painting in his hands. The origin myth. Shifeng was in shock and disbelief as he looked at the information displayed before him. Origin myth, divine artifact rank item, contains an origin space passed down from the mythical era. So long as enough energy is injected, the origin space can be activated and used to modify and strengthen items. Cooldown, 1 natural day. Unbelievable. It was absolutely unbelievable. At first glance, the origin myth might seem a little too ordinary to be a divine artifact. After all, it only had a simple description indicating its ability to modify and strengthen items. However, upon closer inspection, one would notice that no limitations were mentioned in the description. This meant that the origin myth did not have a limit on how much it could modify or strengthen an item. This point alone would put its value far beyond even godly relics such as the Shadow Incinerator and Seven Luminaries Codex. As for the name Origin Myth, it was something that virtually every power in the greater god's domain was familiar with. This was because the Origin Myth was the most prized possession of the Origin Sanctuary, one of the greater god's domain's 12 sanctuaries. Only, the Origin Myth had been missing since the mythical era. During the mythical era, the Origin Sanctuary ranked among the top 3 of the 12 sanctuaries, and the reason it could stay at such a high rank was due to its possession of countless treasures. Meanwhile, according to rumors, most of these treasures came from the Origin Myth, with some even being divine artifacts. But one day, the Origin myth suddenly went missing, plunging the Origin Sanctuary into chaos. Although the Origin Sanctuary had tried everything to locate its most prized possession, it ultimately failed. As a result, its stockpile of treasures stopped growing, and its ranking among the 12 sanctuaries plummeted, falling from the top 3 to 10th place. Who would have thought the well-renowned Origin myth would be hidden inside the God Slayer's treasury? When Shifeng looked at the Origin myth in his hands, he suddenly understood why the Sunlight Blade would react so fearfully toward it. Although the Sunlight Blade was regarded as an arcana by the Sun Dynasty, it was still just a divine artifact. With the Origin myth's powers, it was entirely possible to modify the Sunlight Blade to abandon its use of holy power and instead adopt the use of mana. In that case, the Sunlight Blade would become a treasure of the human race instead of the holy race. The Sunlight Blade was the creation of one of the holy race's holy ancestors, so it would more or less contain some of the holy ancestors' will. Because of this, it would naturally be against becoming a treasure of the human race. Hence, it tried to flee when it discovered the Origin myth. Unfortunately, all the Sunlight Blade accomplished was to inform Shifeng of the Origin myth's existence. "Let's try it on you, then." Thinking up to this point, Shifeng retrieved the Sunlight Blade from his bag and placed it into the Origin myth. Although the Sunlight Blade desperately struggled, it was powerless against Shifeng's iron grip, and it could do nothing but watch as it got sent into the Origin myth's origin space. Activate the origin space. Follow current novels on tarpnovelful.com if you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc. Please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3645, Chapter 719, Inferior Divine. Chapter 3645, Chapter 719, Inferior Divine. Chapter 719, Inferior Divine System. Origin Space has detected the divine artifact Sunlight Blade. System. The Sunlight Blade is identified to be an item exclusive to the holy race. Do you wish to modify it into an item exclusive to the human race? When Shifeng placed the Sunlight Blade into the Origin myth, 2 system notifications appeared before him, instantly turning his suspicion into ecstasy. The Sunlight Blade was one of the Sun Dynasty's most prized possessions. If not for the assistance of Verdant Rainbow's World String, Shifeng could have never killed Chalk Splendor and obtained the weapon. If the Sunlight Blade could be modified into a weapon usable by human players, Zero Wing would instantly gain a strategic weapon. Modify it. Shifeng chose to modify the Sunlight Blade without hesitation. System. Modifying the Sunlight Blade into a weapon exclusive to the human race will cost 80 million units of 7 Luminaries crystal. Do you wish to proceed? 80 million? The corners of Shifeng's mouth twitched when he saw the new notification. 80 million units of 7 Luminaries crystal was a massive sum to any power in the Greater God's domain. Normally, a Tier 6 player would only need 100,000 units for their Tier 6 prompt. A sum of 80 million units was already enough to pay for 800 players' Tier 6 promotion. Previously, Shifeng had spent most of his 7 Luminaries crystals to create his superior divine body, so he only had a little over 14 million units on hand right now. It was nowhere near enough to pay for the Sunlight Blade's modification. Sure enough, divine artifacts cannot be obtained easily, Shifeng thought as he replaced the Sunlight Blade in the origin space with the Abyss Workshop certification. Honestly, Shifeng wasn't particularly disappointed by this outcome. He also wasn't surprised that it cost 80 million units of 7 Luminaries crystal to modify the Sunlight Blade. Every divine artifact, whether it was a weapon or equipment, could affect the Greater God's domain status quo. The fact that the Origin myth could modify a divine artifact was already very astounding. If it could do so at a low cost, on top of that, it could no longer be rated as merely a divine artifact. Instead, it would be an existence far superior to divine artifacts. So, simply knowing that the Sunlight Blade could be modified was already a satisfying result for Shifeng. Now, all he needed to do was save up 80 million units of 7 Luminaries crystal. System. Origin Space has detected the legendary item Abyss Workshop certification. System. Do you wish to strengthen and modify the Abyss Workshop certification? Yes. Shifeng immediately agreed to strengthen the Abyss Workshop certification, wanting to see if he could afford to improve it. Although he had many items he could strengthen using the Origin Myth right now, considering his limited stockpile of 7 Luminaries crystal, he decided to prioritize strengthening items of greater importance. Meanwhile, the Abyss Workshop certification was undoubtedly the item that needed strengthening the most. Zero Wing's greatest advantage in the Eternal Realm was its ability to transport players across realms. Players outside the Eternal Realm had an overwhelming advantage over the Eternal Realm's players in levels and equipment standards, so it would benefit Zero Wing greatly if it could have many such players fighting for it in the Eternal Realm. However, the Abyss Workshop certification could only teleport up to 20 players at a time. This greatly restricted Zero Wing's growth in the Eternal Realm. System: strengthening and modifying the Abyss Workshop certification into an inferior divine item will cost 6 million units of 7 Luminaries crystal. Do you wish to proceed? Proceed. Shifeng gritted his teeth as he made his choice. Although spending 6 million units of 7 Luminaries crystal here would reduce the number of Tier 6 experts Zero Wing could have, Shifeng's current priority was transporting as many Tier 5 and Tier 6 experts from his home god's domain to the Eternal Realm. Only by doing so could Zero Wing safeguard its resurrection camp in the World Arc. Following Shifeng's decision, 6 million units of 7 Luminaries crystal in Shifeng's bag transformed into a stream of energy that flowed into the Origin space. A moment later, a colorful brilliance bloomed from the Abyss Workshop certification, and the magic arrays and divine runes engraved on it disappeared. At the same time, new magic arrays and divine runes formed on it. The new magic arrays and divine runes were visibly more streamlined than the old ones. They even incited the surrounding eternal energy. After the strengthening and modification process continued for 5 minutes, a brand new Abyss Workshop certification appeared in Shifeng's hands. Abyss Workshop certification, inferior divine rank item, a certification of glory in the past. It can be used to teleport to the Abyss Workshop. Cannot be traded. There is a 0.1% drop rate on death. Automatically disappears if stored in a warehouse for more than 180 natural days. Additional Skill 1 Abyss Teleportation. Teleport to the Abyss Workshop from any location. Each teleportation will cost 10 mana stones. Cooldown: 5 natural days. Additional Skill 2 World-Breaking Teleportation. Forcibly opens a world-breaking gate at a pre-designated location. Up to 22 locations can be saved. Each gate can only transfer up to 100 people. Each gate activation costs 2,000 units of 7 Luminaries crystals. Cooldown: 6 hours. Incredible. Shifeng was astonished when he saw the Abyss Workshop certification's new statistics. He was especially surprised by the increase in the number of people world-breaking teleportation could teleport. With the carrying capacity increased by 5 times, he could bring many level 200+, Tier 5 and Tier 6 experts into the Eternal Realm within a short period. We have finished looting the treasury, guild leader. Should we leave now? Phoenix Rain suddenly asked through the team chat. You looted everything? Shifeng couldn't help but be surprised when he saw the palace's empty state. He never thought Phoenix Rain and the others could loot the God-Slayer's treasury completely. Compared to the Nameless City's treasury, the God-Slayer's treasury was a lot smaller, and it could only be considered a small-sized treasury. Even so, 5 players' worth of epic spatial bags wouldn't be enough to loot it completely. Surprised, guild leader? Well, I'll have you know that my commander has a legendary spatial bag. Its inside is like a miniature world, and it is one of a kind in our god's domain, Crimson Mist explained, smiling when he saw the surprised look on Shifeng's face. All of the precious materials, weapons, and equipment Eternal Glory has acquired in the past are kept inside my commander's bag. You can say that my commander is Eternal Glory's mobile warehouse. As if to support Crimson Mist's words, Ji Luorong revealed a look of delight as she patted one of the pouches on her waist, making it look like the palace's items were nowhere near enough to fill her legendary spatial bag. All right. Since everything is collected, let's leave, then. After looking at how much time they had left in the dungeon, Shifeng put the Origin Myth and Abyss Workshop certification away before choosing to forcibly teleport the entire team out of the ruined library. While Shifeng and the others were leaving the ruined library, a commotion erupted outside the dungeon's entrance. "What did you say? Zero Wing is the one behind the first clear?" Disbelief colored Nine Dragons Emperor's face when he heard his subordinate's investigative report. He felt as if the entire world was playing a joke on him. "If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 3646, Chapter 720, Are You Black Flame? Chapter 3646, Chapter 720, Are You Black Flame? Chapter 720, Are You Black Flame? Are you sure your information is correct? Illusory Words asked, surprise coloring her eyes as she looked at the level 209, Tier 5 assassin reporting to Nine Dragons Emperor. Not long ago, the Tier 6 Alliance's members were still angry over Zero Wing's response. They felt that Zero Wing wasn't taking them seriously as it refused to give them any form of assurance. They also felt that Zero Wing was only putting on a strong front and, in reality, it didn't actually have the strength to protect even itself, let alone others. Honestly, after seeing Zero Wing's response, Illusory Words herself couldn't help but suspect that Phoenix Rain might have exaggerated Zero Wing's actual strength to convince her to join. However, if the Tier 5 assassin's report was accurate, everyone from the Tier 6 Alliance, including herself, would have misjudged Zero Wing. It should be known that even the foreign teams could not conquer the taboo mode ruined library. Yet, Zero Wing had done it. Moreover, Zero Wing had accomplished this feat with only 6 Tier 6 players. It was such an incredulous feat that Illusory Words couldn't help but doubt its validity. The information comes from a very reliable source, the Tier 5 assassin stated firmly. Shortly after the announcement of the taboo dungeon being conquered, some of Zero Wing's raid team members have announced their success in the guild. Zero Wing's guild reputation has also increased by 100,000 points around the same time. So, I don't think they were lying. It seems Rain has really made the right bet. Illusory Words couldn't help but envy Phoenix Rain when she heard the Tier 5 assassin's explanation. Before today, nobody took Zero Wing seriously. However, once news of Zero Wing securing the first clear of the taboo mode ruined library spread, the various superpowers would probably fight to establish a partnership with Zero Wing. After all, Zero Wing being able to secure a taboo dungeon's first clear was a strong testament to its strength. Not to mention, taboo dungeons produced level 200 plus weapons and equipment. If Zero Wing could raid a taboo dungeon, it meant the guild would have a stable supply of level 200 plus weapons and equipment. Even if the world gate opened in the future and tons of foreign powers invaded their god's domain, Zero Wing would still have the capital to continue competing. At that time, even if their god's domain's various superpowers sought to join Zero Wing wouldn't necessarily be willing to accept them. However, Phoenix Rain, who had joined Zero Wing before its rise in fame, would have no such concern. Don't get happy for Phoenix Rain too soon, Illusory, Nine Dragons Emperor said before looking at the 2 foreign teams outside the ruined library's entrance. Then, he continued with a sneer, Zero Wing might have secured the first clear, but they can only keep their reward if they have the strength to protect it. Upon hearing Nine Dragons Emperor's words, Illusory Words couldn't help but look at the taboo dungeon's entrance with a grim look. Previously, the 2 foreign teams maintained a competitive relationship with each other, even when they were capturing native Tier 5 and Tier 6 experts to work for them. However, as soon as the system announced that someone had secured the ruined library's first clear, the 2 teams promptly joined forces to blockade the entrance portal and erected a 3-fold spatial barrier that could trap even Tier 6 players for a considerable period. Evidently, these foreign teams intended to eliminate Zero Wing's team and take the first clear rewards for themselves. While Illusory Words was thinking of contacting Phoenix Rain, a beam of crimson light suddenly shot out of the entrance portal and landed a short distance away. Then, individuals began emerging from the crimson light one after another, and these individuals were none other than Shifeng and his teammates. They came out so quickly. How bold of them. Do they not know that the 2 foreign teams are watching the entrance? They might be betting that the 2 foreign teams won't take action so quickly. Otherwise, they'd be fools to come out of the dungeon. Zero Wing is doomed. The first clear it worked hard to secure will now benefit the two foreign teams instead. When Shifeng's team appeared, the various powers experts, who had long given up on raiding the ruined library, engaged in a heated discussion. They didn't think Zero Wing's raid team would be so foolish as to actually leave the taboo dungeon after clearing it instead of trying to buy time by logging out of the game. Players were allowed to go offline inside dungeons in God's domain. They would simply be teleported to the dungeon's entrance when they came back online. Hence, when it came to team dungeons prioritized by the various powers, teams would normally choose to log out inside the dungeon after successfully securing the first clear. Although they would still be forcibly teleported to the dungeon's entrance when they came back online, they would still have bought themselves some precious time. If they waited long enough, they could even leave the dungeon scot-free. After all, it was unfeasible for any power to erect a magic barrier on a dungeon's entrance over a long period. It was especially so for magic barriers that could trap Tier 6 players. The cost would quickly build up and diminish potential profits. Of course, if a team had sufficiently strong backing and knew nobody would dare to target it, it could also leave the dungeon right after securing the first clear. But in everyone's opinion, Zero Wing should be nowhere near comparable to the conglomerates backing the two foreign teams. So what if you can secure the first clear? So what if your team is strong? In the end, all your effort will go to someone else, Nine Dragons Emperor said contemptuously as he looked at Phoenix Rain, who was trapped inside the threefold spatial barrier. It was true that Zero Wing's team was strong. The fact that it could secure the ruined library's first clear proved it was stronger than any of the teams present. However, no matter how strong Zero Wing's team was, it was still just a single team. While the players outside the ruined library closely monitored the situation, the scouts dispatched by the various powers also relayed the scene to their superiors. Black Flame. Let's see how you can keep your arrogance in front of two conglomerate. Blood Sand from the Flower of Seven Sins said with a vicious expression as he watched the video his subordinate sent him. After the fight with Zero Wing, his position in the Flower of Seven Sins had plummeted. Originally, he had been having a headache thinking of how he could get his revenge on Zero Wing after Phoenix Rain and Ji Luorong had joined the guild. But now, he wouldn't need to take action anymore. He could simply let the two conglomerate-backed foreign teams take care of Zero Wing for him. The various native powers of their god's domain might be unfamiliar with the greater world's conglomerates, but as an executive of the Flower of Seven Sins, Bloodsand knew just how terrifying they were. Every conglomerate was an existence that ruled over numerous gods' domains and had countless Tier 6 experts under their command. If an upstart guild like Zero Wing was to go against a conglomerate, only death would await it. At this time, each of the two conglomerate-backed teams outside the ruined library could be seen sending a representative to meet with Zero Wing's team. Of the two representatives, one was a man, and the other was a woman. Both were level 217, Tier 6 players fully equipped with legendary weapons and equipment, and both were clearly experts at the 5th floor standard. After arriving before Zero Wing's team, the woman, who was a level 217, Tier 6 swordsman with a tall and powerful figure, looked at Shifeng with a hint of surprise in her eyes and asked, "Are you Black Flame, the Lord of War Goddesses? If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible." Chapter 3647, Chapter 721, New Divine Glory List. Chapter 3647, Chapter 721, New Divine Glory List. Chapter 721, New Divine Glory List. What's going on? Why does that big shot look like she's familiar with Black Flame? Black Flame? The Lord of War Goddesses? Could Zero Wing's guild leader actually be someone famous? The conglomerate-backed woman's question caught the various native players by surprise. Nobody could understand what was going on right now, and the Tier 6 experts of the various native superpowers were especially confused by this development. The members of the two conglomerate-backed foreign teams were incredibly arrogant. None of them took any native expert seriously, and even the 5 great super guilds' old monsters could not catch their attention. Of course, the arrogance of these foreign experts was not unfounded, as each of them was much stronger than any native expert. It was especially so for the female swordsman who was currently speaking to Shifeng. Previously, not only did she capture 5 of the various superpowers Tier 6 experts by herself, but she had accomplished the feat with only 3 moves. Because of her strength and actions, many native players had already secretly started to refer to her as the Devil. Yet, this devil was now taking the initiative to ask Black Flame for confirmation of his identity. How could everyone watching this not be surprised? "Yes, that is me," Shifeng said, nodding. He also couldn't help but be a little surprised as he looked at the woman before him. While he might have some fame in the Eternal Realm, most of the Greater God's domain should still be unaware of his existence. After all, only a small portion of the Greater God's domain's players and powers were currently involved with the Eternal Realm. In addition, the core experts of upper-ranking hegemonic powers and conglomerates would usually have their focus on the 12 sanctuaries. So, they wouldn't usually show any interest in matters outside the 12 sanctuaries. As for the 7 Luminaries Alliance's Sacred Glory list, it might be within the attention of the Greater God's domain's various powers, but most powers only regarded the experts on this list as talented children worthy of befriending. Nobody would actually regard a Sacred Glory expert as an actual powerhouse in the Greater God's domain. Meanwhile, the woman before him was the leader of a conglomerate-backed team. Moreover, the team she led had come here specifically to raid a taboo dungeon, so it went without saying she should possess incredible combat prowess and status in the conglomerate she was from. There was no reason someone important like her would pay attention to a budding genius on the Sacred Glory list. At most, she would know of the existence of such a person. After all, whether it was the Luminous Glory list or Sacred Glory list, both would see significant changes every now and then, but only a minority of those on these lists could ultimately become powerhouses in the Greater God's domain. Greetings, Mr. Black Flame. I am Sword B, the Vice Commander of the Red Mirror Conglomerate's 3rd Main Force. I am also currently serving as the leader of the Red Mirror Conglomerate's Vanguard team. When the female swordsman received Shifeng's confirmation, a hint of respect immediately appeared on her indifferent face. I truly did not think I would have the fortune of meeting you in this God's domain. Before Sword B could continue speaking, the male berserker, who was the leader of the other conglomerate-backed team, suddenly stepped forward. Greetings, Mr. Black Flame. I am Light Chaser, the leader of the Forest Crystal Conglomerate's Vanguard team. The male berserker took the initiative to introduce himself. I didn't think you were personally taking action, Mr. Black Flame. I now know why the taboo dungeon can be conquered so quickly. If my superiors learn of this, they will probably be given a fright. Sword B and Light Chaser behaved as if they were speaking to an old friend when they talked to Shifeng. The hint of respect in their voices was also obvious, and it caused the surrounding spectators to fall silent. Even Phoenix Rain and the others of Shifeng's team couldn't help but look at this scene in stunned silence. When they were about to leave the ruined library, Phoenix Rain and the others had already prepared themselves for a tough fight. However, the attitudes of the 2 conglomerate-backed teams' leaders were nothing like they expected. Rather than trying to rob them, it looked more like these 2 individuals were congratulating them for their success. I still have other business to tend to. If you have nothing else for me, can I leave? Shifeng asked. He could tell that Sword B and Light Chaser were eager to continue their conversation, but he wasn't interested in doing so. It also didn't seem like they wished to harm Zero Wing, so although he didn't know their motives, he naturally wouldn't take the initiative to attack them. Of course. Since you have other matters, it is only natural that you tend to them first, Mr. Black Flame, Light Chaser said. He could tell that Shifeng wasn't planning to stay any longer, so he hurriedly waved at his subordinates, saying, "What are you all still standing there for? Did you not hear that Mr. Black Flame has something to do? Hurry up and make way." When the members of the 2 conglomerate-backed teams heard Light Chaser's words, they dared not disobey and quickly took down the magic barrier covering the dungeon portal. Then, they took the initiative to make a path for Shifeng's team to leave the plaza. When the various native experts saw this scene, all of them were dumbfounded. What's going on? Illusory Words was similarly stunned as she watched Shifeng's team safely depart from the plaza. It should be known that the 2 conglomerate-backed teams had made it very obvious they were going to take lethal action against the team that secured the ruined library's first clear. Otherwise, They wouldn't have gone out of their way to join forces and erect a magic barrier over the dungeon's entrance. Yet, the instant the leaders of the two teams saw Shifeng, they behaved as if they had just met an old friend and even personally saw him off. Nine Dragons Emperor was similarly confused by this development. It should be known that even the leader of the Dragon Hunting Temple's vanguard team had to behave respectfully in front of Sword Bee and Light Chaser. "What's wrong? Don't tell me you're acquainted with Black Flame," the one-eyed guardian knight from the Dragon Hunting Temple asked when he saw Nine Dragons Emperor's gaze fixated on Shifeng's team. "I'm not acquainted with him, but a friend of mine is," Nine Dragons Emperor said, shaking his head. Then, unable to help his curiosity, he asked the one-eyed guardian knight, "Who exactly is that Black Flame, Mr. Dragon Tamer? Why would those two behave so respectfully toward him?" "Your friend is very fortunate, then," the one-eyed guardian knight named Dragon Tamer said. Then, he looked at Nine Dragons Emperor and pondered for a moment before asking, "Have you heard of the Greater God's Domain's Divine Glory List before?" "The Divine Glory List?" Hearing Dragon Tamer's question, Nine Dragons Emperor quickly recalled the Greater God's Domain's Apex ranking lists previously mentioned by Hidden Mist. "Is it the ranking list where only the Greater God's Domain's Apex experts can enter?" "That's correct." Dragon Tamer nodded. Then, he looked at Shifeng's departing back and respectfully said, "Black Flame is the latest expert to enter the Divine Glory List. The Lord of War Goddess's Black Flame. Moreover, he has been granted the rank of 281st. That is a high ranking, even on the Divine Glory List. His 281st on the Divine Glory List." Nine Dragons Emperor nearly lost his footing when he heard Dragon Tamer's words. Even the lowest-ranked expert on the Divine Glory List was an extraordinary existence who could single-handedly shake an entire realm, let alone someone ranked within the top 300. When dealing with such an individual, even cross-realm conglomerates would have to tread carefully, let alone the average conglomerate. If any of their God's Domain's native powers could get into the good graces of such an expert, they could be worry-free even when developing in the Greater God's Domain, let alone in their God's Domain. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3648, Chapter 722, Times have changed. Chapter 3648, Chapter 722, Times have changed. Chapter 722, Times have changed. Black Dragon Empire, Black Dragon City, Zero Wings Residence. "We are done appraising and tallying the loot we got from the treasury," guild leader Phoenix Rain reported excitedly as she stepped into the guild leader's office. "In addition to 12,485 Divine Titan sources, we have obtained 216 God Chaser sets and 114 God Slayer combat puppets." "That many?" Shifeng was a little surprised by the numbers Phoenix Rain reported. Although he had long known the God Slayer's treasury would house extraordinary wealth, he didn't think it would be to such an extent. Firstly, the value of the Divine Titan sources and epic-ranked God Chaser sets went without saying. As for the God Slayer combat puppets, they were bona fide advanced Dark Gold combat puppets. They were superior to even the Dark Gold combat puppets the Seven Luminaries Alliance used in the defensive clash against the Sun Dynasty. Each could overwhelm the average Tier 6 player, even when piloted by a Level 0 player. Although a force of 114 God Slayer combat puppets still wasn't enough to let Zero Wing triumph over the Sun Dynasty in an all-out clash, it should be enough to let Zero Wing defend its resurrection camp in the World Arc. Besides that, we have already integrated with 6 superpowers and received the real estate of 5 empires and 26 kingdoms. Our stockpile of 7 Luminaries crystal is currently sitting at 15 million units, and our Tier 6 expert count has reached 14. As for Tier 5 experts, we now have over 10,000 level 200 plus Tier 5 experts, of which 2,000 are at level 210 and above, Phoenix Rain continued reporting. Also, as per your instructions, I have asked the 164 level 210 plus Tier 5 experts who have mastered at least one basic law if they are willing to sign the God's Domain contract you provided, and 109 have agreed. "Excellent," Shifeng said, nodding in satisfaction. "Have everyone who has signed the contract gather in the residence as soon as possible. We will leave our God's Domain in 3 hours." We're leaving today? Phoenix Rain couldn't help but look at Shifeng in surprise. Shortly after the two conglomerate-backed foreign teams respectfully saw Shifeng off from the ruined library, many native powers expressed their wishes to join Zero Wing. As a result, Zero Wing became swamped with work selecting and integrating these powers. Fortunately, Zero Wing was very stringent on the powers and players it accepted. Otherwise, completing the preliminary integration in just a day would have been impossible. Originally, Phoenix Rain thought they would have a few more days to complete the integration work. She never thought they would be heading for the Eternal Realm so soon. Zero Wing's situation in the Eternal Realm isn't looking too good from what I've been told, so we'll need to send reinforcements as soon as possible, Shifeng said with a wry smile. If possible, he would also prefer to bide his time to bring more experts into the Eternal Realm. Unfortunately, the Sun Dynasty did not plan on giving him more time. The World Ark was one of the most important locations in the Eternal Realm, and there were two reasons for this. Firstly, it was a producer of secret treasures. Secondly, it was a gateway for players to enter Holy Ring City. Currently, Holy Ring City was the only known location where players could reincarnate into a mythical race. Meanwhile, the power of mythical races was so great that they could influence the greater god's domain's power structure, and this held true for both human players and Holy Race players. Because of this, Holy Ring City would inevitably become a gathering place of immense wealth and talent in the future. Once Holy Ring City developed to its peak, it wouldn't even be an exaggeration to equate its significance to an entire realm. If Zero Wing couldn't establish a foothold in Holy Ring City, it would have much greater difficulty establishing itself in the Eternal Realm. I'll notify them right away, Phoenix Rain said before leaving the office. 3 hours later. When Shifeng opened a world-breaking gate, Phoenix Rain, Illusory Words, and the other Tier 6 experts of Zero Wing couldn't help but look at it with a fervent gaze. They had always dreamed of traveling to the world outside of their god's domain. After all, a single god's domain was too small of a stage for a Tier 6 player. Only by stepping onto a bigger stage could they develop more effectively. Not to mention, now that it was only a matter of time before the inhabitants of their world needed to migrate to the greater world, they would need to start earning the greater world's currency and resources. Otherwise, once their world's currency and resources became unusable, they would immediately become destitute. Those in the first batch, follow me through the gate. Those in the second batch, wait here for 6 hours, Shifeng said before taking the lead to cross the world-breaking gate. Seeing this, those selected to be in the first batch quickly followed Shifeng through the gate and had their vision blinded by a bright flash. Then, when they could see again, they found themselves standing in a room filled with unbelievably dense mana. The room even had a trace of eternal energy. Is this the world outside our god's domain? Phoenix Rain couldn't help but widen her eyes in shock as she looked out the window at the courtyard of Zero Wing's residence. Although she had taken only a few glances, she could already tell the combat standards of the players walking in the courtyard. The 4th floor standard. Even the weakest player walking in the courtyard was a 4th floor expert. It should be known that even domain realm experts were incredibly rare in their god's domain. As for those who had reached the 4th floor standard, they were all existences who could compete for a spot among the 10 saints. Yet, such experts were the most common type of experts found in Zero Wing's residence in the Eternal Realm. While Phoenix Rain and the others were looking through the window of Shifeng's office with shocked expressions, a woman entered the room. The woman had an extraordinary presence, instantly dominating everyone's attention as soon as she appeared. "You're finally back, Guild Leader. Vice Guild Leader Fry and I would have failed to hold on had you taken any longer to return." Carrying the Chaos Windblade on her back, Gentle Snow was akin to a war goddess as she walked up to Shifeng. Although she was currently only at level 180, Phoenix Rain and the others felt as if they were standing before a Tier 6 god. In fact, the power she carried within her body was so overbearing that it distorted the space around her. "Gentle Snow?" Phoenix Rain couldn't help but be surprised when she saw Gentle Snow. Although it had been years since she last saw Gentle Snow, she could still recognize her face. Gentle Snow, the Snow Goddess. The woman was very famous during the early days of God's Domain. When she suddenly disappeared from God's Domain, Many powers lamented over her disappearance as they all felt that Gentle Snow had the potential to become a Tier 6 expert. At one point, Phoenix Rain had also tried to recruit Gentle Snow. She felt that Gentle Snow was comparable to Blue Phoenix in talent, and she was confident the woman could become of huge assistance to her. Unfortunately, Gentle Snow turned down her offer, and she never saw the other party ever since. Now that Phoenix Rain was meeting with Gentle Snow again, she found that the other party had become inhumanly strong. Gentle Snow had become so strong that Phoenix Rain doubted she could survive more than a handful of moves against her. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3649, Chapter 723, Advanced Feingold Flying Ship. Chapter 3649, Chapter 723, Advanced Feingold Flying Ship. Chapter 723, Advanced Feingold Flying Ship. Guild Leader Phoenix? Gentle Snow was a little surprised to see Phoenix Rain in the room. She didn't think Chiffon could successfully abduct the renowned demon queen of their home god's domain. Personally, Gentle Snow admired Phoenix Rain a lot. This was because the other party had single-handedly developed the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion into an overlord in their god's domain. In contrast, not only did she fail to properly manage Ouroboros, a first-rate guild, but she even ended up getting dismissed from the guild. I am no longer the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Great Pavilion Master, so you don't have to address me as Guild Leader Phoenix. I'm slightly older than you, so call me Big Sis Phoenix instead, Phoenix Rain said, shaking her head. At the same time, she couldn't help but have mixed feelings as she looked at Gentle Snow. Phoenix Rain considered herself rather talented. She had also been superior to Gentle Snow in combat standards the last time they met. Yet, from what she could tell, Gentle Snow's combat standard should have already reached the extrasensory realm. You've reached the 5th floor standard and learned that gold combat technique already, Snow? Chiffon was similarly surprised when he sensed Gentle Snow's aura. Before he left, Gentle Snow admittedly exuded a very strong aura already. However, that was by virtue of the Chaos Windblade enhancing her basic attributes to an extraordinary extent, and he did not feel an ounce of danger when he stood in her presence. Not to mention, even with the Chaos Windblade, Gentle Snow's basic attributes were still inferior to his at the time. Now that he had reached level 191, which was 11 levels higher than Gentle Snow's current level, he logically should have an even bigger advantage in basic attributes over Gentle Snow than before. Yet, he could now feel a vague sense of danger coming from her. Of all the explanations he could think of, the only reasonable one was that Gentle Snow had become a 5th floor expert who had grasped a gold combat technique. Emitim. The gold combat technique I received from the 7 Luminaries Alliance is highly compatible with me, and I was lucky enough to achieve a breakthrough when I was fighting against the Holy Race experts some time ago, Gentle Snow said, nodding and revealing an excited expression. 9 Sword Eradication was the name of the technique she had exchanged from the 7 Luminaries Alliance as her reward, and it was one of the few advanced gold combat techniques offered to her for exchange. She also suspected it to be a technique created by the Goddess of Space as it looked very similar to the swordsmanship she had seen while completing a guild guidance quest. Originally, she had only exchanged the technique to help her learn the swordsmanship in the guidance quest. She never really expected to be able to learn 9 Sword Eradication, seeing as it was an advanced gold combat technique. However, to her surprise, she actually succeeded. Is the Holy Race's offensive very fierce? Chiffon asked when he noticed the fatigue on Gentle Snow's face. No shelters were available in the World Arc, so players could not get any proper rest to recover their concentration while operating there. As for the resurrection camps, they only functioned to resurrect players and nothing more. So, even with the help of concentration recovery potions and tents, players could only delay the inevitable. Meanwhile, if players wished to avoid dying from concentration exhaustion, they would have to periodically return to a city for proper rest. However, it had only been a few days since he left the Eternal Realm. Unless Gentle Snow had been stationed at the resurrection camp throughout this entire time, there was no way she would look as tired as she was now. Things are indeed a little tricky, Gentle Snow said, sighing. Although the Seven Luminaries Alliance is safeguarding the frontline and has even extended some assistance to our camp, the Sun Dynasty is employing guerrilla warfare and giving the Alliance no opportunities to help us. Thus far, the Sun Dynasty is only attacking us with a 100-man team of Tier 6 experts, and the team will always withdraw after landing a swift blow on us. As a result, our Tier 5 members keep decreasing, and we can't even leave the camp to explore. Even Azure Shadow's group has died several times already. It seems they don't want to waste too much manpower dealing with us. Shifeng immediately understood the situation after hearing Gentle Snow's report. How are things coming along on Melting Flame's side? They have produced another 100 sets of eternal magic armor for us. Melting Flame has also successfully become a great Grandmaster Forger, Gentle Snow said. But just these 100 sets aren't enough to change the state of battle, so Melting Flame has gathered all of the guild's manpower and even borrowed some of the Red Dragon Nation's manpower to rush the production of a Silver Wing. I was just about to retrieve it and use it to reinforce the Resurrection Camp. They've completed a Silver Wing already? Shifeng couldn't help but be surprised. Currently, exploration of the World Ark's inner area was of the utmost priority for both the human race and the Holy Race. Neither side would allow the other to gain any advantage in Holy Ring City. It was why the Sun Dynasty had mobilized so little manpower to deal with Zero Wing. While a 100-man team of Tier 6 experts was impressive, it was nowhere near enough to capture Zero Wing's Resurrection Camp. At most, such a force could be used to eliminate some of the camp's Tier 5 and Tier 6 defenders. Not to mention, even if the Sun Dynasty successfully eliminated Zero Wing from the World Ark, it would not be able to reclaim the Sunlight Blade. Hence, the Sun Dynasty had chosen to stifle Zero Wing's progression in the World Ark instead of committing more manpower to completely eliminate Zero Wing from the World Ark. Have a look yourself, Gentle Snow said as she shared a holographic image of a completed Silver Wing flying ship with Shifeng. I can't believe it. Shifeng was greatly surprised as he looked at the image before him. At this point in time, it should logically be impossible for Zero Wing to manufacture the Silver Wing flying ship in the Eternal Realm. After all, secret silver flying ships were considerably rare even in the Greater God's domain, let alone the Eternal Realm. Thinking up to this point, Shifeng couldn't help but feel joyful. All of you rest for the time being. We will head for the World Ark together afterward, Shifeng said as he looked at Phoenix Rain and the others. Then, he turned to Gentle Snow and continued, You come with me to meet with Melting Flame, Snow. It's about time we turn the tables on the Holy Race. Normally, the addition of just one secret silver flying ship would do little to help with Zero Wing's current predicament. But if the Silver Wing flying ship was powered by a divine Titan source, it would instantly become the ruler of the skies. Not long after, Shifeng arrived at Melting Flame's workshop with the confused Gentle Snow. Currently, Melting Flame was in the process of forging an eternal magic armor. Guild leader, what brings you here? Melting Flame asked, feeling pleasantly surprised when he saw Shifeng. See if this thing can help improve the Silver Wing, Shifeng said, getting straight to the point as he placed a divine Titan source on Melting Flame's work table. This is a divine Titan source. Melting Flame's eyes brightened immediately after he inspected the crimson crystal on the stone table. Where did you find such godly material, guild leader? Just tell me if it's of any use, Shifeng said, exasperated by Melting Flame's response. Yes, it's of incredible use. Melting Flame answered with certainty. If I have this divine Titan source, I can upgrade the Silver Wing into an advanced fine gold flying ship. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3650, Chapter 724, New Silver Wing. Chapter 3650, Chapter 724, New Silver Wing. Chapter 724, New Silver Wing. TL Notes. Made a change to Chapter 681, original. Meanwhile, once players develop their concentration to the extremes of the Tier 6 standard, they could mentally manipulate their divine might to form a domain, which was also known as a divine domain. Edited. Meanwhile, once players developed their concentration to the Tier 6 limit standard, they could mentally manipulate their divine might to form a domain, which was also known as a divine domain. Advanced Feingold? Shifeng's eyes brightened when he heard Melting Flame's answer. How many people do you need? How long will the upgrade take? Secret silver flying ships were already considerably rare in the Greater God's domain. As for Feingold flying ships, they were as rare as a phoenix's feather, and they were usually regarded by upper-ranking hegemonic powers as one of their most prized possessions. Originally, Shifeng thought Melting Flame could, at best, upgrade the Silver Wing into a Feingold flying ship. After all, the improvements flying ships received from each rank upgrade were much more significant than weapons and equipment. Hence, it was much more challenging to upgrade a flying ship's rank. Meanwhile, upon reaching the advanced Feingold rank, a flying ship would be akin to a mobile fortress. Not only could it withstand the attacks of Tier 6 players, but it also had the power to kill Tier 6 players. If the average Tier 6 player were to encounter an advanced Feingold flying ship while traveling across the Void Sea, they would usually steer clear of its path. For these reasons, advanced Feingold flying ships were used by conglomerates as their primary method of transporting cargo between realms. It's only a simple power source replacement, so I'll only need one Grandmaster engineer to assist me with the modifications. The process also shouldn't take more than 4 or 5 hours, Melting Flame said, anticipation coloring his face as he looked at the crimson crystal on the table. He had only seen an advanced Feingold flying ship once before, and it was when he was visiting a holy city. When the advanced Feingold flying ship appeared near the holy city, the entire city erupted with commotion. Even the holy city's Tier 6 defenders went on high alert for fear that the advanced Feingold flying ship was looking to do harm to the city. Now that he had the opportunity to create an advanced Feingold flying ship, he couldn't help but feel as if he was in a dream. Okay, go and get a Grandmaster engineer right away, but make sure they are trustworthy, Shifeng said, nodding. Then, he handed Melting Flame a God's Domain contract and added, also, whoever you choose must sign this contract. The both of you will be responsible for modifying all silver wings produced in the future. While time was of the essence currently, Zero Wing could still afford to wait a handful of hours, especially if it meant it could add an advanced Feingold flying ship to its Resurrection Camp's defense. At that time, the Resurrection Camp's safety would rise to a whole new level. As for why Shifeng was placing such heavy emphasis on keeping the Silverwing's upgrade process a secret, it was because almost all advanced Feingold flying ships in the Greater God's domain came from ancient ruins. Not a single power in existence could manufacture flying ships of such rank. Hence, should news of Zero Wing having the ability to produce advanced Feingold flying ships get leaked, the consequences would be beyond Zero Wing's capability to bear. Do you still have more of this godly material, guild leader? Melting Flame couldn't help but doubt his ears when he heard Shifeng's words. He dared not believe Shifeng had more than one Divine Titan source. As an inferior divine material, the Divine Titan source's rarity went without saying. Melting Flame wouldn't even be surprised if there only existed a handful of pieces in the Greater God's domain. Yet, going by Shifeng's words, it was obvious that Zero Wing was looking to create more than just one advanced Feingold-ranked Silver Wing. In other words, Zero Wing still had more Divine Titan sources. I can't tell you how many I have, but you can come straight to me for a Divine Titan source for every Silver Wing you complete, Shifeng said. Also, make sure you are the only person present when installing the new power source. The value of a Divine Titan source was not much lower than an advanced Feingold flying ship, and the Divine Titan sources Shifeng obtained from the Godslayer's treasury numbered over 10,000. If Melting Flame were to learn of this number, he would probably go crazy. If all these Divine Titan sources could be converted into advanced Feingold flying ships, Zero Wing would be unstoppable even in the Holy Race's Greater God's domain, let alone the human race's Greater God's domain. I understand. Rest assured, guild leader. Melting Flame nodded, understanding the importance of this matter. Immediately, he left to seek out a trustworthy engineer. The fact that Zero Wing could mass-produce secret silver flying ships was already plenty astonishing. If it became known that Zero Wing could mass-produce advanced Feingold flying ships, all hell would break loose in the Eternal Realm. Zero Wing's residence, special workshop, 2 Zero Wing members wearing a Grandmaster Engineer emblem currently stood before a work table, looking at Melting Flame, wondering why the other party had gathered them here. "Why did you summon me and Silk Radish here, Boss Flame? Do you have something important for us to do?" Dozing Crocodile, a young man in his mid-20s and one of the 2 Grandmaster engineers in the room, asked as he looked at Melting Flame nervously. Due to his contribution to the production of a large number of eternal magic armor for the guild, Melting Flame had already become Zero Wing's chief forger. Although he still wasn't a core executive of Zero Wing, his status was already comparable to that of core executives. "It's nothing major," Melting Flame said as he looked at the 2 individuals who had joined Zero Wing at the same time as he did. Then, with a smile, he took out a God's Domain contract and continued, "I need an exclusive engineer to work under me. The benefits are listed in this contract. See if any of you are interested." Heeding Shifeng's instructions, Melting Flame settled on 2 possible candidates to take on Shifeng's task with him. These 2 candidates were Silk Radish and Dozing Crocodile. They were among the same batch of players who joined Zero Wing as he did, and both were currently among the best engineers in Zero Wing. "We can never log in to God's Domain once we break the contract." Dozing Crocodile frowned when he read the final clause of Melting Flame's contract. Admittedly, Melting Flame offered incredibly lucrative benefits in his contract. In addition to a monthly salary of 100,000 star coins, Melting Flame also offered an advanced living quarter in Zero Wing's main headquarters. In the current situation where the surrounding third-tier mobile cities were all frantically competing over Star Lake City's housing spaces, this was a privilege Dozing Crocodile dared not dream of obtaining. However, signing this God's Domain contract would also mean that he would forever be restricted to working for Zero Wing. It should be known that he had only joined Zero Wing on behalf of his family, and his relationship with Zero Wing could only be considered a temporary partnership. There was also a strong possibility he would become the head of his family in the future. Compared to the benefits he could reap from being the ruler of a hegemonic power, the benefits Melting Flame offered could only be considered laughable. So, there was no reason for him to restrict himself to Zero Wing. "I'll sign this contract, Big Brother Melting Flame," Silk Radish said without hesitation after reading the contract. Silk Radish's circumstances were different from Dozing Crocodile's. Dozing Crocodile was an original inhabitant of the greater world, and he even had citizenship in a third-tier mobile city. Even if he left Zero Wing, he would still have plenty of equally good options to choose from. However, for Silk Radish, Zero Wing was her only option as it was the only guild from her home world currently operating in the greater world. Not to mention, once she signed the exclusive contract, she would become a core member of Zero Wing and receive more resources to support her advancement to the Great Grandmaster rank. "Okay. Sign it and follow me," Melting Flame said, nodding. Subsequently, Silk Radish signed the God's Domain contract and left to modify the Silver Wing with Melting Flame. As for Dozing Crocodile, he nonchalantly returned to his workshop and resumed striving to become a great Grandmaster engineer so that he could become the head of his family as soon as possible. Roughly 5 hours later, Melting Flame ran to the guild leader's office and happily handed the modified Silver Wing to Shifeng. Then, he left to start production on the second Silver Wing so that he could modify more secret silver flying ships into advanced fine gold flying ships and produce a fleet of them for Zero Wing. Zero Wing Residence, Guild Leader's Office, it's all up to you now. After Melting Flame left, Shifeng took out the Origin Myth and expectantly moved the advanced fine gold Silver Wing from his bag into the Origin space. An advanced fine gold flying ship might be powerful, but calling it the ruler of the skies was a stretch, especially against the Holy Race's Sun Dynasty. One advanced fine gold flying ship was not enough to get Zero Wing out of its current predicament. However, with Zero Wing's current situation, it wouldn't be possible to produce a second advanced fine gold flying ship within a short time. Hence, Shifeng decided to take things a step further and upgrade the Silver Wing again. System: Origin Space has detected the advanced fine gold Silver Wing. Strengthening and modifying the Silver Wing will cost 4 million units of 7 luminaries crystal. Do you wish to proceed? 4 million? What a scam. Shifeng couldn't help but be flabbergasted by the system notification. It had only cost him 6 million units of 7 luminaries crystal when he upgraded the Abyss Workshop certification from a legendary item into an inferior divine item. Yet, the The system was now asking him to pay 4 million units just to strengthen an advanced fine-gold flying ship. The cost scaling was absolutely ridiculous. Eventually, though, Shifeng still chose to grit his teeth and strengthen the silver wing. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3651, Chapter 725, Foundation Debut. Chapter 3651, Chapter 725, Foundation Debut. Chapter 725, Foundation Debut. Zero Wing Residence, Guild Leader's Office. Immediately after Shifeng made his decision, a colorful radiance bloomed from the silver wing inside the origin space. At the same time, the countless magic arrays engraved on the silver wing's hull were broken down and reorganized, the entire process lasting over a dozen minutes. When the strengthening process concluded, a brand new silver wing appeared before Shifeng's eyes. Silver Wing Flying Ship, Advanced Dark Gold Flying Ship, Maximum Capacity, 1000 People. Durability 70,000 Possesses Tier 6 Upper Rank Armor. Item storage when liberated, 150,000 bag space slots and 6,000 non-bag space slots. Additional active skill 1, Holy Spirit Field. When activated, prevent all enemies within a 10,000-yard radius from utilizing their surrounding energy for 30 minutes. No cooldown. Each activation costs 300 units of 7 Luminaries Crystal. Additional active skill 2, Holy Spirit Barrier. When activated, renders all allies within a 3,000-yard radius immune to damage for 1 minute. Cooldown. 30 minutes. Each activation costs 1,000 units of 7 Luminaries Crystal. The Silver Wing Flying Ship carries 100 Spirit Destruction Cannons, each possessing power at the Tier 6 peak standard, 28 floating spirit cannons that can be used offensively and defensively, each possesses power at the Tier 6 peak standard, 3 Spirit Disintegration Cannons. Their power can reach the Tier 6 limit standard. The Silver Wing Flying Ship has a flight speed that rivals Tier 6 legendary flying mounts. Each activation of the Silver Flying Ship costs 5,000 units of 7 Luminaries Crystal, and it expends 100 units of 7 Luminaries Crystal per day while in operation. Incredible! Shifeng gasped when he saw the new Silver Wing's statistical description. An advanced dark gold flying ship. He had only ever seen these behemoths appearing in the war between the two races. These advanced dark gold flying ships were also why the various apex powers could confidently traverse the front lines. As for the exact statistics of those advanced dark gold flying ships, they were only known to the apex powers that owned them. Everyone else could only make guesses. But after seeing the statistics of one himself, Shifeng could only describe advanced dark gold flying ships as heaven-defying. Simply the fact that the upgraded Silver Wing possessed Tier 6 upper-rank defensive armor meant that the average Tier 6 player could be utterly incapable of damaging it. Even taboo-level experts wielding divine weapons would only be able to damage it slightly. Besides that, the Silver Wing's offensive capabilities were also through the roof. It should be known that spirit destruction cannons were weapons that could normally only be found in void fortresses situated in the Void Sea. With 100 spirit destruction cannons equipped, the advanced Dark Gold Silver Wing could already rival the firepower of a void fortress. Not to mention, there were also the spirit disintegration cannons that could launch attacks close to rivaling the attacks of ancient gods. If a Tier 6 tank was struck by one of these cannons without a life-saving skill active, they would die on the spot, even if they were fully equipped with legendary equipment. No wonder those advanced dark gold flying ships I've seen could single-handedly take down entire fortresses. With such firepower, even Tier 6 gods will have to steer clear of them. Shifeng couldn't help but get a little emotional as he moved the brand new Silver Wing into his bag. He had coveted advanced dark gold flying ships greatly in his previous life. However, flying ships at the fine gold rank and above could only be acquired from ancient ruins. Although Zero Wing had explored many ancient ruins, it only managed to procure several fine gold flying ships. As for dark gold flying ships and beyond, only the various apex powers were known to have any. Moreover, they were all acquired through many years of effort. But now, Zero Wing finally had an advanced dark gold flying ship of its own. Moreover, so long as Zero Wing had enough 7 Luminaries crystals, it could easily produce more than what the various Apex powers owned. But I'm going to have to get more 7 Luminaries crystals after this. When Shifeng took a look at the remaining 7 Luminaries crystals in his bag, he couldn't help but feel helpless toward the Origin Myth. The Origin Myth's ability was undeniably amazing, but the cost to use it was also beyond imagination. After integrating 6 superpowers from his home god's domain into Zero Wing, he had acquired a little over 3 million units of 7 Luminaries crystal, bumping his stockpile to 12 million units. But after strengthening the Silver Wing, his stockpile had fallen back to 8 million units, which was only enough to fund the Tier 6 promotion of 80 players. Not to mention, it also cost 7 Luminaries crystals to maintain and operate the Silver Wing. Simply put, the 7 Luminaries crystals he currently had on hand were not at all enough for his use. While Shifeng was wondering whether he should laugh or cry about his situation, Gentle Snow suddenly entered his office. Good news, Guild Leader. Fervent Samsara and Heavy Abyss have successfully advanced to Tier 6. Gentle Snow excitedly reported. They've succeeded. Shifeng was shocked. Before Shifeng left for his home god's domain, Fervent Samsara and Heavy Abyss had already received the primordial chaos body's legacy and began their challenge to construct a superior divine body in the residence's underground secret room. However, if asked whether the two could succeed, Shifeng couldn't actually say for certain. After all, there shouldn't be more than a few players who had successfully constructed a superior divine body across the entire Greater God's domain. Even in his previous life, Shifeng had only successfully constructed a superior divine body because he was lucky enough to obtain a primordial god legacy that provided the complete procedure to construct a specific superior divine body. However, the primordial chaos body's legacy only showed players a general guideline. If players wished to construct a superior divine body through the primordial chaos body, they would need to have incredibly high mastery over world laws and magic arrays. Both of them say they have succeeded, Gentle Snow said, nodding. She understood Shifeng's shock as she knew that Fervent Samsara and Heavy Abyss had been constructing superior divine bodies for their Tier 6 promotion. Good. Have them get ready. We'll be heading to the World Ark in a moment, Shifeng said with a smile. You're bringing them as well? Gentle Snow couldn't help but grow worried. They've been busy with their promotion all this time, so they aren't even at level 170 right now. They're at least 10 levels behind the players operating at the World Ark. How about we let them level up a little first before sending them to the World Ark? Though a 10-level gap wouldn't make much of a difference between players and monsters under level 200, Zero Wing's opponents in the World Ark weren't monsters but Holy Race players instead. Meanwhile, a 10-level gap would give the Holy Race players a considerable advantage in weapons and equipment. Unless Fervent Samsara and Heavy Abyss faced opponents with inferior combat standards, they'd fare no differently than cannon fodder. Don't worry. They can overcome a 10-level gap with their standards, Shifeng said, chuckling. The fact that Fervent Samsara and Heavy Abyss had constructed a superior divine body for their Tier 6 promotion meant they would have a significant advantage over the average Tier 6 player in basic attributes, physique, and mana. They were also experts who were equipped with legendary items and had mastered the advanced bronze mana purification technique. Even if they were 10 levels behind the other Tier 6 players operating in the World Ark, they could easily bridge the gap if they equipped the Eternal Magic Armor and Dragon's Fury secret treasure set. Not to mention, both were experts who had mastered an advanced lore. Alright, then. I will notify them, Gentle Snow said. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3652, Chapter 726, Guild War. Chapter 3652, Chapter 726, Guild War. Chapter 726, Guild War. World Ark, Soul Lake. Ever since the 7 Luminaries Alliance lifted restrictions on the World Ark's inner area, the inner area's resurrection camps had become a gathering place for the Eternal Realm's various powers and independent players. The Soul Lake Resurrection Camp under Zero Wing's ownership was especially popular. This was because the Soul Lake, the map the Resurrection Camp was situated on, was a level 175+ map that had a much lower population of monsters compared to other maps. This made it an ideal place for players seeking to get some rest. As icing on the cake, the Soul Lake was also close to the core area's Holy Ring City. Due to these reasons, even though the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp charged an exorbitant fee of 20 eternal silver per person per day and would occasionally come under attack by the Sun Dynasty's forces, tens of thousands of players still flocked to it. This, in turn, allowed Zero Wing, Azure Fang, and the Red Dragon Nation to generate significant amounts of wealth. Inside one of the advanced tents in the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp, Elder Sword, according to our scouts, Zero Wing has already started to gather its forces in the Crystal City and is preparing to reinforce its resurrection camp with more Tier 6 experts, a 5-meter-tall young man carrying a towering shield said to 19th Sword respectfully after he entered the tent. Meanwhile, following this behemoth of a level 178 Guardian Knight's appearance, the 20+ Tier 6 experts resting in the camp immediately felt a powerful pressure falling onto their shoulders. Heavy Shield Titan, a veteran expert on the Divine Glory list. Although Titan had died once while assisting the Seven Luminaries Alliance, the Alliance compensated him handsomely after he was resurrected. As a result, not only did his strength not fall, but it even increased as he managed to grasp his third gold combat technique. Zero Wing's actions are futile, 19th Sword said nonchalantly. This resurrection camp is generating 6,000 eternal gold coins every day. Do you think the Sun Dynasty will simply sit back and watch as Zero Wing grows stronger? But the Sun Dynasty's recent attacks haven't significantly damaged Zero Wing, Azure Fang, or the Red Dragon Nation, Elder Sword. Scratching his head in confusion, Titan asked, could there be new movements from the Sun Dynasty? Thus far, the Sun Dynasty had only sent one 100-man Tier 6 team to attack the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp. Although this team could always kill several hundred of the camp's defenders, the damage to Zero Wing, Azure Fang, and the Red Dragon Nation wasn't particularly severe, as their Tier 6 experts had only died a couple of times. Not to mention, Zero Wing had the ability to summon Tier 6 war goddesses. So long as the 6 Tier 6 war goddesses appeared on the battlefield, the Sun Dynasty's experts would scatter like frightened rabbits, none daring to clash with the war goddesses head-on. Besides the war goddesses, Zero Wing's gentle Snow had also distinguished herself in the fights with the Sun Dynasty. At one point, she had single-handedly killed 26 of the Sun Dynasty's Tier 6 experts, instantly earning her recognition as a god-ranked expert from the various powers. Even as a veteran expert on the Divine Glory list, Titan dared not say he could beat gentle Snow in a duel. With the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp already having such powerful defenders, if Zero Wing's Black Flame joined in the defense, the Sun Dynasty's 100-man Tier 6 team would become utterly powerless against the Resurrection Camp. Do you truly think the Sun Dynasty lacks the strength to deal with Zero Wing's Resurrection Camp? 19th Sword sneered. The only reason the Sun Dynasty has turned a blind eye to Zero Wing until now is because the other holy race powers were keeping it busy. But now, the Sun Dynasty has already declared to the Seven Luminaries Alliance that unless Zero Wing returns the Sunlight Blade and begs for forgiveness, it will mobilize its Holy Guard to eradicate all of the World Ark's Resurrection Camp. The Holy Guard. Titan was shocked by this revelation. Isn't that one of the Sun Dynasty's 5 conquest legions? According to the information the Seven Luminaries Alliance provided to the various powers, the Sun Dynasty had established 5 conquest legions to combat the other royal powers operating in the Eternal Realm. Meanwhile, the Holy Guard was one of these 5 legions. The Holy Guard was a legion with 12,000 members, and it could be further categorized into 620-man teams. Even the weakest member was a 5th floor standard, while team leader-level individuals were all god-ranked experts. When working together, each team could put up a good fight against even taboo-level existences. Not to mention, the Holy Guard also had various war weapons at its disposal. If the Sun Dynasty truly mobilized the Holy Guard, even if it was only a portion, it would be enough to make the Seven Luminaries Alliance suffer. Flattening the resurrection camps on the human side would also be a simple task. Indeed, which is why we have gathered here, 19th Sword said, nodding. Then, a cold glint flashed in his eyes as he continued, now that the Sun Dynasty has threatened to mobilize its Holy Guard, even the Seven Luminaries Alliance can no longer afford to protect Zero Wing. It might be if Black Flame capitulates, but if he doesn't, it will be the perfect opportunity for us to claim this resurrection camp for ourselves. I understand. I will contact Milia and have her transfer more manpower over from the royal capital, Titan said with an excited look. Although Zero Wing was much stronger than 19th Sword expected, it remained a fact that it had offended the Sun Dynasty. With the Sun Dynasty threatening to mobilize its Holy Guard, if Black Flame refused to capitulate, Zero Wing would have to withdraw from the World Arc, leaving the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp to be claimed by others. Considering this, many human powers had most likely already set their sights on the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp. Naturally, the Skylight Association couldn't miss such a great opportunity, either. After all, the profits the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp could generate were simply astonishing. While the Skylight Association was preparing to capture the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp, the various powers operating in the area took a similar course of action and continuously gathered their forces. This caused the player population of the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp to increase rapidly toward the 100,000 threshold. What should we do, Vice Guild Leader Fry? Garut, one of Azure Fang's two great Vice Guild leaders, asked as he paced around the tent in annoyance. These powers aren't even trying to hide that they're waiting for our destruction. Yet, the Seven Luminaries Alliance still hasn't given us any feedback. The Star Lake Resurrection Camp was a cash cow. Even though Azure Fang and the Red Dragon Nation only received 30% of the profits each, they still had a daily income of more than 2,000 eternal gold. Moreover, their daily income could easily increase tenfold in the future as more players enter the World Arc. But now, there's no point asking me, Fry said, snapping out of her daze and revealing a wry smile. I only know that the Seven Luminaries Alliance has already sent someone to the Crystal City to contact Guild Leader Black Flame. By the looks of things, the Alliance wants to get Zero Wing's response before deciding what to do. Thinking of the Sun Dynasty's Holy Guard, Fry felt powerless and could only place her hopes on the Seven Luminaries Alliance. If even the Seven Luminaries Alliance refused to help, Zero Wing, Azure Fang, and the Red Dragon Nation would most definitely lose the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3653, Chapter 727, To Arms. Chapter 3653, Chapter 727, To Arms. Chapter 727, To Arms. Eternal Realm, Crystal City of Secrets. Due to the underground Crystal Palace's existence, the Crystal City of Secrets had become one of the 10 most populated cities on the human player's side in the Eternal Realm. The city's player population exceeded 60 million, and it could be considered a highly populated city even in other realms. At this time, a commotion was taking place in the Crystal City due to the Sun Dynasty's sudden declaration of war. Zero Wing really knows how to find trouble, provoking a royal power from the holy race of all things. Not even the Seven Luminaries Alliance can save Zero Wing now. Zero Wing's fall won't just stop at the World Arc, either. If Zero Wing refuses to return the divine artifact it took, the Sun Dynasty will target the other powers operating in the World Arc as well. At that time, those powers will definitely find trouble with Zero Wing. From what I heard, many of those who joined Zero Wing are regretting their decision right now. I wonder how Zero Wing's guild leader is going to respond. It might be fine if he apologizes and returns the divine artifact, but if he refuses to capitulate, Zero Wing will probably have to part ways with its advanced residents. It's a pity that Zero Wing is only an emerging power. If its manpower and resources were spread across the Eternal Realm like the various pseudo-apex powers, it could still thrive even without relying on the World Arc. The players resting and chatting in the bars and restaurants of the city couldn't help but sympathize with Zero Wing as they discussed the guild's predicament. They never thought the guild that had over 200 fifth-floor experts and the potential to become a pseudo-apex power would dare to provoke the Sun Dynasty, an existence that even the Seven Luminaries Alliance was unwilling to provoke. While the Crystal City's various powers and players were wondering how Zero Wing's guild leader Black Flame would respond, Zero Wing's residents had become incredibly lively. This was because many guild members who had gone offline to rest had come rushing back after learning of the Sun Dynasty's declaration of war. Meanwhile, when the Seven Luminaries Alliance's representatives stepped into the guild hall, the Zero Wing members in the building looked at these representatives with emotions of anxiety, anger, and expectation. "What do you think the guild leader will do, Boss Samsara?" a level 176, Tier 5 swordsman asked as he looked at Fervent Samsara. Hearing the swordsman's question, the other Zero Wing members nearby all looked toward Fervent Samsara, who was currently a level 167, Tier 6 Berserker God. Fervent Samsara was one of Zero Wing's 3 overlords. While not a guild executive, his influence in the guild surpassed even the vice-guild leaders. He was also acknowledged as one of the 5 strongest experts in the guild. Is there even a need to ask? Of course we will be giving the Sun Dynasty a fight. Even if we lose, we will simply withdraw from the World Arc. I doubt there is anything the Sun Dynasty can do to us outside the World Arc, a young elementalist said, fighting spirit brimming in his eyes. It's not so simple, Fervent Samsara said, shaking his head when he heard the young elementalist's words. Then, with a serious look on his face, he continued, "We can fight, but we absolutely cannot abandon the World Arc, otherwise, we will quickly get overtaken by the other powers in the Crystal City. After all, the mythical races will be of great help to the various powers in exploration." Originally, Fervent Samsara had been feeling quite happy after he successfully advanced to Tier 6. However, his happy mood quickly disappeared as news of Zero Wing's predicament greeted him as soon as he left the underground secret room. While Fervent Samsara was wondering how Shifeng would respond to the Seven Luminaries Alliance's representatives, he suddenly noticed a group of cloaked players through the corner of his eyes. Although these players had hidden all their personal information with their black cloaks, the 6-winged emblem they wore on their cloaks showed that they were Zero Wing members. "Abyss, do you know who those cloaked people are?" Fervent Samsara whispered to the female knight in ice blue armor sitting beside him. Fervent Samsara was familiar with most of Zero Wing's members, and he was certain he had never seen anyone from the group of cloaked players. His sixth sense also told him that these individuals were not simple. It was especially so for the dozen or so players sitting at the head of the group. He actually got goosebumps looking at them. This was the first time he had experienced such a situation in the Eternal Realm. "I'm not sure, either. I heard they joined Zero Wing not long ago, and they were even personally welcomed by the guild leader," Heavy Abyss said, shaking her head. Then, looking at the group of cloaked players with a serious gaze, she continued, "But I can feel that those people are no weaker than you and I. Just how many secrets does our guild leader have?" While looking at the supposed leaders of the cloaked players, Fervent Samsara had his curiosity toward Shifeng piqued. Now that Fervent Samsara had constructed a superior divine body, he dared say he was one of the strongest players in the Eternal Realm. He would even dare to clash against players with divine artifacts. Yet, of the group of cloaked players, about a dozen gave him a feeling of danger. This situation was simply unbelievable. Zero Wing's Guild Hall, 3rd floor VIP lounge. "The Seven Luminaries Alliance has already conveyed the Sun Dynasty's intention to you," Guild leader Black Flame, Verdant Rainbow, who was currently at level 182, said to Shifeng while wearing a serious expression. "The Alliance currently has most of its forces occupied fighting another royal over in the core area, so only the forces I oversee in the inner area are available to help you. After discussion, the Alliance hopes Zero Wing can withdraw from the Soul Lake temporarily. Once the Sun Dynasty transitions into the core area and becomes occupied fighting the other royal power, it won't be able to spare much of its forces to target Zero Wing. Zero Wing can return at that time, and the Alliance will also assist Zero Wing in defending its resurrection camp." In reality, the Seven Luminaries Alliance was infuriated by the contempt the Sun Dynasty had shown. Unfortunately, there was nothing the Alliance could do about the Sun Dynasty's threat, as it just so happened that the Alliance had started a territorial clash with another royal power in the World Arc's core area. "I am grateful for the Seven Luminaries Alliance's goodwill, Miss Verdant," Shifeng said. "But now that the Sun Dynasty has declared war on Zero Wing, it would not make sense for Zero Wing to retreat without a fight." "Are you really going to do this, Guild leader Black Flame?" Verdant Rainbow couldn't help but sigh when she heard Shifeng's answer. The Holy Guard isn't some second-rate legion like the ones the Sun Dynasty sent to attack us initially. It is a force established specifically to deal with other royal powers, and every member is currently a bona fide Tier 6 player. If it comes down to a fight, even a taboo-level existence like yourself might die. Is that so? Well, they are more than welcome to try, Shifeng said, a cold glint flashing in his eyes. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3654, Chapter 728, World Arc in Turmoil. Chapter 3654, Chapter 728, World Arc in Turmoil. Chapter 728, World Arc in Turmoil. Crystal City of Secrets, Airport, Lunatic. He's simply a lunatic. Is he trying to bring his entire guild down with him? Looking out the window of the flying ship they were on, the Outer Elder who had accompanied Verdant Rainbow to Zero Wing couldn't help but be shocked as he looked at the players gathering inside Zero Wing's residence. The fact that the Seven Luminaries Alliance had sent Verdant Rainbow, the Alliance's rising star, to communicate with Black Flame was already enough to show how much it valued Zero Wing. Normally, not even the guild leaders of pseudo-apex powers would receive such a treatment. As if that wasn't enough, the Seven Luminaries Alliance had even promised that so long as Zero Wing temporarily withdrew from the World Arc this time, it would help Zero Wing re-establish itself in the World Arc in the future. This was an opportunity that many powers could only dream of obtaining, yet Black Flame had turned down this offer and insisted on fighting the Sun Dynasty's Holy Guard with only Zero Wing's strength. Although Black Flame is indeed a little crazy, Zero Wing shouldn't be underestimated, either, Verdant Rainbow said as she looked at Zero Wing's residence. When we first arrived inside the guild hall, I sensed at least 10 experts who could threaten me. 10. The Outer Elder couldn't help but look at Verdant Rainbow in astonishment. How can a new guild possibly have so many taboo-level existences? It should be known that Verdant Rainbow was a new generation chosen one of the Seven Luminaries Alliance. Her combat standard was through the roof. Paired with the World String, although she still wasn't at the standard of the Alliance's veteran taboo-level existences, she could still be considered mid-tier among all taboo-level existences in the Greater Gods domain. Hence, anyone who could make Verdant Rainbow feel threatened should be a taboo-level existence at the very minimum. But how could Zero Wing possibly have 10 taboo-level existences? I don't know. Verdant Rainbow shook her head. Then, thinking of the Holy Guard she had previously encountered in the World Arc's core region, she sighed and said, but it doesn't matter whether Zero Wing has 10 or 20 taboo-level existences. None will matter in front of the Sun Dynasty's Holy Guard. The Sun Dynasty's strength far exceeded the Seven Luminaries Alliance's imagination. Of the Holy Guard's 12,000 members, over 600 were considered team leaders. All of them were also battle-hardened individuals who had clashed against the Holy Race's other royal powers for many years. So long as these team leaders formed a 20-man team with the Holy Guard's weaker members, they could trade blows with taboo-level existences. With the Holy Guard having 12,000 members, it meant that the Legion had 600 teams that could trade blows with taboo-level existences. 10 against 600? With such a huge disparity in numbers, even a layman could tell Zero Wing's chances of victory were non-existent. This was also why the Sun Dynasty dared declare that it would eradicate all of the human race's resurrection camps in the World Arc. While Verdant Rainbow and her entourage were leaving the Crystal City of Secrets, news of Zero Wing's intention to fight the Sun Dynasty quickly spread like wildfire, and every player and power who received news of this matter couldn't help but be shocked by Shifeng's decision. World Arc, Soul Lake Resurrection Camp, Skylight Association's advanced tent, Black Flame is truly insane. Titan couldn't believe his eyes when he read the report from his subordinate. Isn't that good news? Milia the Mjolnir smiled. We will now have a stable source of income to fund the construction of a guild town. After seeing the fortune the Blaze conglomerate was raking in thanks to its guild city, many powers had already started to prepare for the construction of their own guild town, and the Skylight Association was no exception. However, constructing a guild town in the Eternal Realm was easier said than done. Aside from requiring a building order, astronomical funding was also needed. Fortunately, The Skylight Association could easily solve this problem so long as it took over the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp. Originally, had Zero Wing chosen to make peace with the Sun Dynasty, it could have easily defended the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp with the help of Azure Fang and the Red Dragon Nation. But now, Zero Wing had willingly chosen to fight the Sun Dynasty to the death. Titan nodded in agreement with Milia's words. Many powers were eyeing the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp due to its economic value. Fortunately, Zero Wing had chosen to send itself into the jaws of death and give everyone a chance to lay claim to the Resurrection Camp. How is the gathering of our forces coming along? 19th Sword interrupted. The 42 Tier 6 experts stationed in the capital are already making their way here, Milia answered, smiling after checking the latest update report. Once they arrive, we will have 70 Tier 6 experts here, far exceeding the Scarlet Merchant Alliance and Flaming Bee. At that time, not even the Star Dynasty can clash with us. Good. Have them hurry up a little, 19th Sword said, nodding. If we don't have enough forces by the time the Sun Dynasty starts its attack, those other powers might get the upper hand over us. You can rest assured, Elder Sword, Titan said. According to our scouts, the Sun Dynasty seems to have learned of Zero Wing's intention and is enraged by it. Originally, the Sun Dynasty had already stopped amassing its forces after gathering 4,000 players. But now, the Sun Dynasty has changed its mind and is looking to gather all Holy Guard members. This process will take at least a day. Our reinforcements would have long arrived by then. Zero Wing truly has dug a hole for itself. Even 19th Sword couldn't help but be stunned when he heard Titan's report. Originally, 19th Sword estimated the Sun Dynasty would only send 3,000 or 4,000 members of its Holy Guard. Even then, he would consider it an overestimation of Zero Wing's strength. Yet, because of Zero Wing's bold declaration to fight back, the Sun Dynasty was now looking to mobilize the entire Holy Guard against Zero Wing. It should be known that the Holy Guard had 12,000 members. This was 3 times the original force the Sun Dynasty was going to use to attack the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp. Zero Wing had truly dug a hole for itself this time. Crystal City of Secrets, all of our members are ready, Guild Leader. We can set off at any time, Gentle Snow reported to Shifeng with slight trepidation as she looked at the near 1,000 Zero Wing members who were brimming with fighting spirit. Of the Zero Wing members gathered, all of them were 5th floor experts. Many were also experts who had mastered Saint-ranked mana techniques. They were already the strongest combatants Zero Wing could muster. If these experts were annihilated, Zero Wing would be truly finished. Good. Let's set out. After looking at everyone's eager expressions, Shifeng took out the Silver Wing from his bag. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3655, Chapter 729, Steel and Iron. Chapter 3655, Chapter 729, Steel and Iron. Chapter 729, Steel and Iron. Crystal City of Secrets, Zero Wing's residence. What is the guild leader doing? It looks like he's retrieving something from his bag. When the Zero Wing members gathered in the residence's courtyard saw Shifeng chanting an incantation at his bag, they couldn't help but grow curious. Seeing as Shifeng had gathered so many of Zero Wing's experts today, it was clear that they would be going to reinforce the guild's resurrection camp in the World Arc. Yet, rather than hurrying over to the World Arc, Shifeng was taking his time retrieving something from his bag. While everyone was wondering what Shifeng was retrieving, a gigantic spatial magic array suddenly appeared above the residence. The silver spatial magic array covered the entire residence, its appearance causing a commotion both inside and outside the residence. A moment later, a flying ship forged entirely from iron and steel emerged from the magic array. The ship spanned over 1,000 meters from bow to stern, and its gradual descent cast a dark shadow over the land beneath it. At first glance, the ship was akin to a floating mountain, and its appearance dumbfounded the Zero Wing experts in the courtyard. Is that a flying ship? What's going on? Since when did our guild have a flying ship? Heavens! How can there be a flying ship this massive? It's at least 1,200 meters long, At this time, even fervent Samsara, who was familiar with many of the greater god's domain's secrets, couldn't help but be shocked by the sight of the silver-wing flying ship. It should be known that the average flying ship in God's domain only measured about 100 or 200 meters long. Even the various pseudo-apex powers prided fine-gold flying ships only measured about 800 meters long. However, if placed beside the silver wing, even fine-gold flying ships would look no different from infants standing beside an adult. Is this flying ship really the silver wing, guild leader? Gentle Snow asked. She couldn't help but rub her eyes in doubt as she looked up at the flying ship above her. Gentle Snow knew of Shifeng's intentions to modify the silver wing. She had also seen the Silverwing's original appearance. Originally, the Silverwing was only a 500-meter-long flying ship armed with 30 cannons. Yet, the current Silverwing had not only tripled in size, but its armaments had also quadrupled in number. The ship's 3 main cannons were especially noteworthy. Merely the mana fluctuations they naturally radiated were enough to make her heart palpitate. It should be known that she was currently strong enough to rival Tier 6 gods of the same level. There should be very few existences in the current eternal realm that could threaten her. Yet, she was now feeling the threat of death coming from a flying ship's main cannons. Naturally, Shifeng said, chuckling. Only, the current Silverwing is at the Advanced Dark Gold rank. Advanced Dark Gold? Doesn't that put it on the same level as the Obsidian? Gentle Snow exclaimed. The Obsidian. It was currently the strongest known flying ship in the Greater God's domain, and it was owned by the 7 Luminaries Alliance. The Obsidian was without a doubt a strategic weapon for war, and it was rumored that one Obsidian flying ship had enough firepower to rival a god-ranked fortress. Hence, Gentle Snow couldn't help but be astonished to hear that the Silver Wing was now equal to the Obsidian. While watching the Silver Wing gradually descend, Shifeng asked Gentle Snow, by the way, you've already had the selected 114 fifth-floor members sign a confidentiality contract, right? All 114 members have signed it already. If they dare leak any information on the Godslayer combat puppet or transfer their assigned unit to a third party, they will permanently lose the ability to log into God's domain, Gentle Snow said with certainty. Good. Shifeng nodded. Then, he instructed, also, before I give the command, tell them not to take out the God-Slayer combat puppets under any circumstances. The Soul Lake Resurrection Camp was of utmost importance to Zero Wing. Not only was it an important source of income, but it also served as an assurance for the guild to recruit Tier 6 experts in the Crystal City of Secrets. With the Holy Race Army being several times or possibly even dozens of times larger than the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp's forces, the God-Slayer combat puppets would become one of the Resurrection Camp's primary trump cards. Hence, it was imperative that the Holy Race Army remained ignorant of the God-Slayer combat puppets' existence before the war began. Otherwise, their effectiveness in battle would plummet. Combat puppets were often used as trump cards in wars between the various powers. When deployed at opportune moments, they could often achieve amazing results. It was especially so for Dark Gold combat puppets. Dark Gold combat puppets came with large destruction spells that could match Tier 6 destruction curses cast by Tier 6 mage gods. Even when operated by Tier 0 players who hadn't reached the refinement realm standard, Dark Gold combat puppets could act as a mobile cannon and devastate battlefields. Naturally, in the hands of experts, Dark Gold combat puppets could display even greater combat effectiveness. Oftentimes, even a handful of Dark Gold combat puppets were more than enough to turn the tides of a battle involving tens of thousands of experts. So, one could imagine just how terrifying a force of 114 advanced Dark Gold combat puppets manipulated by fifth-floor experts could be. During the war between the two races in Shifeng's previous life, even though the Holy Race had an overwhelming numerical advantage over the human race, human players still managed to hold their ground and put up a good fight. Ultimately, they even managed to stop the Holy Race Army's advance in the Eternal Realm. Meanwhile, apart from the few monstrously powerful experts, the reason the human race managed to accomplish such a feat was largely due to war weapons. Of course, war weapons were not without their flaws. It was especially so for advanced Dark Gold combat puppets like the Godslayer combat puppet. Simply powering up a God-Slayer combat puppet already cost 500 units of 7 Luminaries crystal, while every use of its large destruction spells cost 50 units of 7 Luminaries crystal. If a guild didn't have a sufficiently large stockpile of 7 Luminaries crystals, it wouldn't matter how many war weapons it possessed. It wouldn't be able to afford to use them. Rest assured, guild leader. They won't make a move without your command. Moreover, to ensure they have sufficient firepower, I have assigned each of them 5,000 units of 7 Luminaries crystal. That should be enough to last them through the entire battle, Gentle Snow said excitedly. Before Shifeng's return, Gentle Snow could only despair whenever she considered facing the Sun Dynasty's encirclement. However, after seeing the 114 God-Slayer combat puppets Shifeng brought back, she immediately gained the confidence to trade blows with the Sun Dynasty. Subsequently, Shifeng had the near 1000 experts gathered in the courtyard board the Silver Wing. Then, under the gaze of the Crystal City's players, the Silver Wing transformed into a silver glow as it flew toward the World Ark, its speed vastly superior to the flying transport ships docked at the city's airport. World Ark, Soul Lake. As the battle between Zero Wing and the Sun Dynasty drew closer, the various Powers members and independent players started distancing themselves from the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp, leaving only the members of Zero Wing, Azure Fang, and the Red Dragon Nation. It's been nearly a day, yet Zero Wing's forces have yet to show up. They probably got scared. I heard that many of the Sun Dynasty's subordinate powers have decided to join the crusade against Zero Wing because of the bounty the Sun Dynasty is offering. Even excluding the Sun Dynasty's forces, their forces totaled over 200,000 players. By now, they have already blocked the paths leading to the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp, and even the 7 Luminaries Alliance's teams will have trouble reaching the camp. Quick, look. There's a flying ship approaching from over there. Isn't that Zero Wing's 6-winged emblem? If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3656, Chapter 730, Unsheathed Sword. Chapter 3656, Chapter 730, Unsheathed Sword. Chapter 730, Unsheathed Sword. Soul Lake Resurrection Camp. Although many players and powers had distanced themselves from the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp due to the upcoming war, the camp's player population hardly decreased. This was because Azure Fang and the Red Dragon Nation had gathered over 100,000 members at the camp. In addition, Azure Fang and the Red Dragon Nation had also set up multiple large magic barriers and top-tier magic elven cannons around the camp. The magic elven cannons numbered as many as 300, and each could exhibit power at the Tier 6 standard. In static defenses alone, the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp was already superior to many of the Eternal Realms fortresses. As expected of pseudo-apex powers. I didn't think you would manage to gather so many Tier 5 elites and war weapons on such short notice, Shifeng said as he scanned the players in the Resurrection Camp. At a glance, he could see that all of the Tier 5 experts in the camp were fully equipped with fragmented legendary items and common secret treasures. Some of them were even equipped with combat secret treasures. Not even Zero Wing could equip so many players to such a standard. Unfortunately, this is still far from enough. As we are right now, we are far behind even the Sun Dynasty's 3 subordinate guilds, let alone the Sun Dynasty's Holy Guard, Fry said, shaking her head. For the sake of defending the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp, she had pulled all the strings she could and gathered 70,000 experts from the Red Dragon Nation. She would have preferred to gather even more experts if it was possible. Unfortunately, this was already most of the experts the Red Dragon Nation had operating in the Eternal Realm. It was the same for Azure Fang. Only, Azure Fang managed to gather a little more experts than the Red Dragon Nation, its forces totaling 80,000. Although the combined forces of Azure Fang and the Red Dragon Nation reached 150,000, they were still numerically disadvantaged compared to the 200,000-plus players the Sun Dynasty's 3 subordinate guilds managed to gather. In a frontal confrontation, their chances of victory would be slim. Do you have any suggestions for the upcoming siege, Guild Leader Black Flame? Garut asked. Garut was honestly surprised that Zero Wing had only decided to mobilize about 1,000 players. Originally, he thought Zero Wing would at least send tens of thousands of Tier 5 experts to aid in the defense. That way, they wouldn't be too far behind in numbers compared to the Holy Race's side. Yet, Zero Wing had only sent close to 1,000 players. Although there were over a dozen Tier 6 experts among them, and some Tier 5 experts were equipped with the Eternal Magic Armor equipment set, they would be of little use in a battle involving hundreds of thousands of Tier 5 and Tier 6 Holy Race players. The fact that Zero Wing had brought the behemoth known as the Silver Wing didn't matter, either. Their chances of victory were still slim. After all, the Holy Race army attacking them had over 10,000 Tier 6 experts. Moreover, these were all experts trained to fight against other royal powers. They were much more superior compared to the Holy Race players who had attacked the Seven Luminaries Alliance's resurrection camps previously. Rather than be on the defense, I am considering taking the fight to them. No matter what, a resurrection camp is not a stronghold. Even if you strengthen its defenses with magic barriers and arm it with various war weapons, once the battle begins, we will fare no differently than if we clashed with the enemy on an open field, Shifeng said. On the other hand, if we ambush the enemy's scattered Tier 6 combatants with small but elite assault teams, we can greatly reduce the enemy's top combatants before the main event. The use of Tier 5 players in the upcoming battle would be limited, and Tier 6 players would be the main fighting force for both sides. If one side's Tier 6 players suffered annihilation, its remaining forces would be powerless to resist the other side's Tier 6 players. Previously, in the defensive war led by the Seven Luminaries Alliance, they couldn't let too many Holy Race players enter the Alliance's resurrection camps as it would disrupt the occupation process. Hence, they had to stay in the camps to prevent anyone from sneaking through. Now, though, the Sun Dynasty's goal was to target Zero Wing and eliminate all the forces stationed in the Soul Lake resurrection camp. In such a situation, it would be foolish for them to stay inside the resurrection camp. It was especially so now that he had brought a bunch of level 200+ experts from his home god's domain to the Eternal Realm. In a defensive siege, the combat effectiveness of these level 200+ experts would be limited. However, if they were put in a field battle involving only tens of thousands of players, their strength would be overwhelming. Of course, this was a secret Shifeng did not plan on sharing with outsiders like Fry and Garut. Reducing their combat power before the main battle is indeed a good idea, but with our current forces, it really isn't ideal to do such a thing, Fry said after pondering over Shifeng's suggestion. Based on the intelligence I've received, the Sun Dynasty's 3 subordinate guilds are no pushovers. Each guild has several hundred Tier 6 experts under their command. Even if they are scattered across the Soul Lake, each group should still have over 100 Tier 6 experts. Meanwhile, the total number of our Tier 6 combatants is only a little over 100. We will need to concentrate all of our Tier 6 combatants into one team if we want to eliminate any of their teams within a short time. I agree. Even with your current strength, we can, at most, afford to form 2 assault teams, Guild Leader Black Flame, Garut said, nodding in agreement with Fry. But if it is just 2 assault teams, the damage we can do to the enemy will be negligible. We will also expose our top combatants, making it easier for the enemy to counter us. 1 or 2 teams might not do the trick, but what about 10? Shifeng said, chuckling. 10 assault teams? Fry and Garut couldn't help but look at Shifeng in confusion. They failed to understand what was going through Shifeng's head. Their 3 guilds only had a little over 100 Tier 6 experts. If they were to form 10 assault teams, each team would only receive about a dozen Tier 6 experts. They'd be sending their forces straight into the jaws of death if they tried pitting a dozen Tier 6 human experts against 100 Tier 6 Holy Race experts. You two don't have to worry about this. Zero Wing's members will take on the responsibility of attacking the enemy's Tier 6 experts. I only need you to send some scouts to determine the positions of the enemy forces, Shifeng said, not bothering to explain himself. If there are no more problems, let's quickly get things into motion. The enemy's Tier 6 experts will start to group up if we drag our feet for too long. Shifeng's words stunned Fry and Garut. However, since they couldn't think of a good reason to object to Zero Wing shouldering all responsibilities for attacking the enemy, they agreed to provide several hundred scouts for reconnaissance. Even if these scouts were annihilated, it wouldn't result in much losses to their two guilds. Subsequently, Shifeng had Phoenix Rain and the other players from his home god's domain form 9 assault teams and scattered them across the Soul Lake. Then, he hopped onto the Silver Wing with Zero Wing's main force members and flew to the border connecting the Soul Lake with the frontline maps. It was already known that the Holy Race army was continuously gathering their forces at the border, so they would definitely find some enemies there. Meanwhile, shortly after Zero Wing arrived at the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp with the eye-catching Silver Wing, news of Zero Wing's arrival quickly reached the Sun Dynasty's Holy Guard. Zero Wing's guild leader has arrived at the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp, Your Highness, Heavenly Ape Saint, who was currently a level 181, tier 6 player, cautiously reported to a woman with a stunning appearance and slender figure. However, it doesn't look like he is as tough as he makes himself out to be. According to our investigations, Black Flame only brought 1,000 players to reinforce the Resurrection Camp. It is obvious he is afraid we will wipe out Zero Wing's forces. As things stand, the three guilds' armies will be more than enough to destroy the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp. I thought the person who killed my foolish little brother would be someone incredible, but it seems I have overestimated him. After hearing Heavenly Ape Saint's report, the woman named Daystar nonchalantly commanded, "Let's not waste any more time, then. Have our gathered forces move out immediately. I want to be back in the core area in half an hour." Understood. Heavenly Ape Saint respectfully withdrew and began instructing the gathered members of the Holy Guard to advance on the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp immediately. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 3657, Chapter 731, Zero Wings Elites. Chapter 3657, Chapter 731, Zero Wings Elites. Chapter 731, Zero Wings Elites. Following the news of Zero Wing's Silver Wing arriving at the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp, the three Holy Race guilds that had entered the Soul Lake quickly went into action. The Sun Dynasty was a royal power of the Holy Race, so although the three guilds were subordinates of the Sun Dynasty, they were still vastly superior to the average human guild. Presently, each of the three guilds had gathered around 90,000 experts to encircle and attack the Soul Lake Resurrection Camp, their combined forces exceeding 270,000. In addition, they had close to 1,500 Tier 6 experts in total. With these forces, they wouldn't fear clashing against even the Seven Luminaries Alliance. Of all the places the Vice Guild leaders could have assigned us to, why did they assign us to receive the new arrivals? What rotten luck we have. By the time we move out, we'll probably have nothing left to do. I know, right? I can only hope that Zero Wing will last a little longer. Otherwise, we'll earn barely any guild contributions on this trip. At the entrance to the Soul Lake, a group of Tier 6 Holy Race experts stood atop a mountain, watching team after team of Holy Race players cross the canyon below. The canyon served as the gateway to the Soul Lake, and these experts were assigned by the three Holy Race guilds to watch over it. However, as they watched their allies cross the canyon and disappear into the Soul Lake, they couldn't help but feel envious. The reason for their behavior was the generous bounty the Sun Dynasty had placed on Zero Wing. Anyone who successfully killed a Zero Wing member would earn guild contribution points from the Sun Dynasty, which was a huge opportunity for Holy Race players. In the Holy Race's greater god's domain, the 10 royal powers had monopolized 99% of all precious resources. Their monopoly over high-ranking holy arts and materials needed to repair legendary weapons and equipment was especially firm. This made it incredibly difficult for other powers to get their hands on these resources. If they wished to get their hands on these precious resources, their only options were to either become strong enough to replace a royal power or subordinate themselves to a royal power. Of course, even after a guild subordinated itself to a royal power, things wouldn't be smooth sailing for all its members. As royal powers would only grant their subordinate guilds a limited amount of precious resources, the members of a subordinate guild typically had to use an exorbitant amount of the guild's contribution points to exchange these resources. The types of resources they had access to were usually very limited as well. But now, they had an opportunity to earn the Sun Dynasty's guild contribution points directly, and all they needed to do was kill members of Zero Wing. Not only did this mean that they could exchange precious resources at a significantly cheaper price, but the variety of items they could exchange would also be much greater. They could even make a fortune by reselling the items they exchanged. Inside a certain tent on the mountain top. How are preparations coming along on your side, Locust? The Holy Guard has already moved out. Once Her Highness Daystar takes action, there won't be anything left for us to do. A giant of a man who was 10 meters tall, covered in holy patterns, and had messy hair said to the elegant middle-aged man resting beside him. If the rumors about Black Flame killing Chalk Splendor are true, he should be able to rank in the Transcendent list. You know how hard it is to find opportunities to fight such experts. It'd be a pity if we don't even get to fight him. The Holy Race's Transcendent list was similar to the Divine Glory list published by the Seven Luminaries Alliance. All those on the list were experts who would be remembered by history. They were also qualified to establish training centers and recruit disciples in the real world. Most importantly, they would qualify to live in the Holy Land, which was the dream of countless Holy Race players. Unfortunately, 90% of the Transcendent list was monopolized by experts from royal powers, and no expert from other powers would ever dare to challenge these individuals. After all, the act of doing so was a provocation to the royal powers. As a result, those not belonging to a royal power could only challenge the remaining 10% if they wanted to secure a place on the Transcendent list. However, there were so many players seeking to challenge the remaining 10% that the current waiting list was over a century. Unless they could come across one of these few Transcendent experts alone out in the fields, it would be nearly impossible for them to get into the Transcendent list. But now, a new opportunity known as Black Flame had appeared. It should be known that Chalk Splendor was a reserve candidate for the Transcendent list, and many powers had deemed it likely he could enter the Transcendent list in the future. Yet, Chalk Splendor had died in the hands of Black Flame, which meant that Black Flame was stronger than him. This meant that so long as someone could kill Black Flame, there was a high chance they could be put on the Transcendent list and skip the trouble of having to defeat an existing Transcendent expert. Black Flame is indeed strong, but it is an exaggeration to say that he has the strength to enter the Transcendent list, the elegant man named Locust said contemptuously. Don't forget that the Seven Luminaries Alliance's Verdant Rainbow was helping Black Flame when he killed Chalk Splendor. Even so, it is still an incredible feat if we can kill such an expert. We will get nominated for a reserve candidate spot at the very least, the giant of a man said excitedly. Six Fingers has a point, a woman with her eyes closed said. The woman sat alongside the giant and the elegant man, and she carried two sabers on her back. If you're not interested, Locust, leave Black Flame to me later on. I was originally planning to challenge one of the Royal Power's reserve candidates, but it will save me a lot of trouble if I can come across Black Flame. Locust was rendered speechless when he heard the woman's words. Sky Pillar Saintess, Myriad Blades. She was a chosen one of the Sky Pillar Guild's latest generation. Both she and Six Fingers, the giant of a man, were his rivals when it came to competing for a spot on the Transcendent list. If he allowed either of them to kill Black Flame, his entry into the Transcendent list would be delayed even further. While Locust, Myriad Blades, and Six Fingers were chatting inside their tent, the Silver Wing had stealthily arrived within 1,000 yards of the canyon's entrance. Currently, the Silver Wing was concealed with a Tier 5 invisibility scroll, and Shifeng stood on its deck as he observed the Holy Race army stationed above the canyon. I'm done analyzing the energy fluctuations, Guild Leader. I detected over 30,000 energy signatures, and 414 of them are Tier 6, Fiery Heart, a Tier 5 Grand Wizard equipped with the God Chaser set, reported through the team chat with certainty. That's quite a lot of Tier 6. It seems we were right to come here first, Shifeng said, chuckling. Is everyone in position? For the current Eternal Realm's human powers, a force of 400 plus Tier 6 Holy Race experts would be considered a huge threat. However, it was a different story for the Tier 5 and Tier 6 experts from his home god's domain, as well as Tier 6 experts like Gentle Snow. Everyone's in position and ready to take action. Guild Leader, give us the command. Hidden Soul, Fire Dance, and 4 level 200 plus, Tier 5 assassins responded one after another to Shifeng's question, each positioned next to a tent occupied by the Holy Race Army's Tier 6 experts. Attack! After seeing that everyone was in position, Shifeng promptly gave the command to attack. TL notes: 1. Sky Pillar Priestess. I am unsure if this should be Holy Child, Holy Daughter, or Priestess. I might come back to make changes in the future. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,